It depends on the project. I mean, you can for instance start out 3 months beforehand or 3 weeks before you start sort of releasing major content, if you like. So when it actually starts is up to you. It depends on your goals. I mean, if you're trying to build an audience and bring in people and maybe trying to facilitate pre-sales and things like that, you might start it even earlier. But it depends depends who you're targeting in terms of your audience. And you know, if you're targeting your peers, for instance, then it's fine to actually be sharing a lot of sort of making of and sharing that information quite early. But if that's not your primary audience, then you know that sort of content is not always as interesting as going straight to the heart of the matter, if you like. In terms of how often, I mean, it depends on your actual goals once again, because there's lots of different projects that fit under this banner. In the end, I mean, obviously you don't want to be quiet online or quiet or unavailable. You know, you need to be responsive to people. But in the end, the most important thing is to operate your project and your outward facing part of the project in terms of, you know, to your audience in the way that's actually that suits you as a person or your team of creators, because I find that people are, they don't mind if there's lots of gaps, if there are gaps in between or something like that, if they're actually interested in engaging with you directly and the people behind it. In that sense, there are no rules. You know, you can actually list down, it's like, oh, you have to do this, you have to put a competition up, you know, get people answering questions, do something. Let's say once a week, like once a day would be too much because you're actually asking people to act and do things too often. But you know, once a week you could you know, be putting something out there that encourages people to do things. So there are sort of pointers that you can be guided by, but in the end you need to absorb that and then do something which actually works with your schedule and the way that you actually operate. There's lots of different things you can do, obviously. I mean, one thing is live events. Obviously, when you're actually doing screenings of the documentary, is thinking about how you can, you know, make that an interesting event. Obviously, having meet the documentary makers behind it, or you've actually got some of the key people that were the subjects of the film or related to the subject of the film, and have them coming along for the event. You can, you may be designing a game, for instance, a digital game. There's a documentary called The Great Work, and that's a documentary on alchemy, on an investigation into alchemy and how it works. And they teamed up with an indie game developer, and the indie game developer was worked out this sort of 2D game that you can actually go through, which is, you know, quite entertaining and beautiful in itself. It's respecting the style of the documentary, you know, in that sense. But then it's also sort of unlocking information about alchemy and, you know, how it actually works. So there's, you know, there's digital games. There are lots of beautiful websites that have been created to complement a broadcast element or, you know, theatrical documentary. The NFB, the National Film Board in Canada, have put out lots of beautiful pieces, Water Life, Pine Point, in which they're experiential websites where, let's say, you're using a lot of assets from the documentary, so you have a lot of visuals and maybe some moving image elements. You can be using the audio from your actual documentary. Now, some of this can be obviously a repurposing of content, or you can actually be creating this is actual extra content which is not in the actual the broadcast element, for instance, and this is one of the reasons why you need to have people coming in right at the very beginning, because you need to make those decisions and be gathering those assets quite early. But yes, there are a lot of works where it's quite experiential and you have beautiful imagery there. It can be information oriented, so it's actually giving more depth that via self-exploration, if you like. There are other works in which they are encouraging activism. The documentary Flow, their complimentary website is basically geared towards getting people doing stuff about water, and so it's not necessarily a experiential website at all. It's geared towards another goal. And there are other ones, let's say, the art of the documentary. Once you go to the website, you basically see all these tiny thumbnails of people's heads, and as you slide your cursor over it, you get a little bit of information. So it's basically an elegant way of drilling down to a whole lot of information, if you like. So that sort of infographic aspect to it. So Rolf de Heer's 10 Canoes, right? That isn't a documentary. Like the film is not a documentary, but around it he had, with a clever titling system, was 11 canoes, 12 canoes, 13 canoes, 14 canoes, 15 canoes, and that included an art installation with a whole lot of pieces of Indigenous art and Indigenous craft pieces. There was also there were also programs for the communities to help them actually get involved in preservation and doing a lot of things. You can actually create, I guess, art books out of the experience. So, the point is that you can actually do a whole lot of, obviously, of different things. It's just a case of figuring out what's appropriate, to the actual message of your content and who you're trying to reach. So sort of marrying those two goals and